So I want to take a personal walk with you as we talk about sitting in one of the most beautiful sanctuaries I've ever seen. Three-sided floor-to-ceiling stained glass in Dallas, Texas, as we search for a church. Story number one. I have been fairly open with you over our relationship about my gravitational pull, my evolution in my relationship with God. I grew up in the church. I grew up in Sunday school. I grew up in the back pew as my mom taught the class of mentally and physically handicapped Samaritans at the United Methodist Church in Sherman, Texas. I grew up a Methodist. It was youth group. It was several times a week. That was a part of my community. On the other hand, my wife grew up an Episcopal. More, I think she would admit, a Christmas and Easter Christian. But I think somewhere along in my 20s, I probably gravitated too much towards intellectualism. I lost humility. I began to think everything in the world could be answered through reason and logic. I'd like to think with age has come wisdom, and with wisdom has come humility, has come the ability to look beyond simply what I can rationalize. I also work on the weekends. I host Fox and Friends on Saturday and Sunday mornings. And I live in Texas and I travel to New York. So as much as spiritually, through reading and prayer, my relationship has been rekindled with God. My time spent in a church has not been something to be proud of, not something that I have devoted, invested time in a church. I was off this weekend, and it was Easter. And I've told you before that one of the things I'm most proud of is my sons both initiating their own baptism, them wanting to personalize their relationship with God. But we've never really found ourselves in a community. We haven't found our church. So this weekend, we began the process of kind of trying on different churches. You know, C.S. Lewis says you're not supposed to be a critic in church. You're not supposed to go and analyze the pastor and analyze the surroundings. You're not supposed to sit there and be a critic. But I also think that you need to find something that fits your vision, your style, your path to God. And it is it's fascinating that this comes from me, at least for me, in a greater context of the decline in religiosity, the decline in society's relationship with God. On Friday on Fox and Friends, we had Cardinal Timothy Dolan on the broadcast, and I said to him, you know, every study, Gallup, Pew, shows that Americans have declined in answering how important religion is to their life. From 30 years ago, 61% of Americans describing religion as very important, to today, 46% of Americans saying it's very important to their lives. I mean, if you go back to the 1950s and 60s, you'd see stats that say over 70% of Americans would say religion is very important. And I asked the Cardinal, I said, what's troubling about that is if you take a broader temperature of America, what you'll see in capitalistic terms is a market demand. I mean, people are depressed. People are lacking meaning. They're searching for purpose. But decreasingly, they're looking for the answer in God. Now, the Cardinal's answer to me was he thinks that we've seen the rise in the worship of self. We've seen the rise in narcissism. We do it through our phones. We do it into the mirror. You could even argue like many of the things that I pay attention to on a pretty regular basis, like self-improvement, physically, diet, is at least in no small part a form of narcissism. Whatever we stare at, whatever we look at, becomes what we prioritize, and what we prioritize becomes what we worship. If we're always staring into the mirror, then we develop a sense of worship of self. And so we decreasingly turn to God. It's clear. That's what's happening in America. And I think that's also part of Christianity becoming somewhat of a target. Now, look, I think what's happening is anything that's in the majority, anything that's seen as being in power, has become a target. We've become a society obsessed to some extent with victimization, and I think in part that's driven by empathy. Look, white, Christian, target. And it was hard not to think about that this weekend when on Easter, Joe Biden, the White House, takes a moment to celebrate Trans Visibility Day on Sunday, on the exact same day as Easter. I was sitting around with some friends. I tried not to scroll this weekend. I did for 10 minutes and it popped up. And there it is. And I'm immediately outraged, as is every one of my friends. Immediately. because I think it fits into a broader context. It fits into this idea that everything that's in the majority, including Christianity, somehow has to be the target of diminishment or even villainization. But, I didn't want to be outraged. And I don't like to sound off immediately. Even today, the front page of FoxNews.com is talking about this story. And there's an element of it that you should be outraged. I saw there was a Catholic leader that said Joe Biden is a cafeteria Catholic, picking and choosing what he likes. But what required only a bit of investment, you soon learn that March 31st, for whatever it's worth, has been, for the last several years, Trans Day of Visibility. This year, it just happened to fall on Easter. And Joe Biden did, whether or not he should have or not, or whether it's necessary or not, recognize Trans Day of Visibility, even though it fell on the same day as Easter. And I think we have to do two things at the same time. We have to go, whoa, this does feel part of the broader context of an attack. But we also can't fall into the trap of just constant outrage, because constant outrage does nothing but kind of feed into that worship of self, our own feelings. We're looking in the mirror. We're mad at all times. And we're not creating any kind of positive vision of the future. And that's what, in just a few moments, I'd love to discuss with the host of Trigonometry. But that takes me back to my search. Again, I grew up Methodist and my wife grew up Episcopal. And look, I appreciate Episcopalians are a lot like Catholics. And I've come to appreciate Catholicism. Travel Europe, go into the cathedrals, and it's hard not to. My sons went to Catholic preschool. And I love the ritualism and the tradition, but there's something in that is lost in translation for me in terms of me personally finding meaning. On the other hand, I don't want to go into a church and just have it be basically like a therapy session, which has also become religiosity, as is wokeism, faith-based. I don't think therapy is our answer to religion. I don't want church to become therapy either. The best I've ever been to is Redeemer, Tim Keller's church in New York, which for me, I like an academic approach. I want to understand religion, history, the Bible, God. And so I'm searching for that, what is the right yin and the yang? What is the right, maybe Methodist church? What is the right Episcopal church that gives honor and isn't just, bands and tambourines, and nothing against that if that's what does it for you, but also isn't just overly encumbered by history and tradition, although that's important. And so that's where we found ourselves this weekend. And we'll continue to search. I'm actually excited about the process of finding a community, which is incredibly important, but also a message that I can mull over when I go home, and be a part of something greater, obviously, not just in my community, but deeper into the meaning of why we are on this earth and who are we here to honor.